A very good morning to all of you. Welcome back to today's analysis session for 7th of July 2023. So we see that in Maharashtra, in case of the NCP, so the meeting, it expels Ajit Pawar and 11 others from the party. So here the topic that is important for us is disqualification. So we need to know about all the nuances regarding that, the previous and the important one, Supreme Court judgments, powers of the Speaker of House. So all of that becomes important. We are not going into the much details of this thing because that's again a political issue, but we need to look at the objective things. Moving forward, freedom of expression being misused in Canada by the anti-India elements, according to the Ministry of External Affairs. So the MEA or official spokesperson, he says that these posters inciting violence against our diplomats and our diplomatic premises abroad, they are unacceptable, and we have called on the government of Canada to ensure safety of our diplomats and our diplomatic missions. So, you know that the Khalisani element, which is in a way, definitely we are seeing the influence from the foreign countries, and one of them is Canada. So we're talking about that, and the freedom of expression, it is being misused by extremists in Canada to legitimize terrorism. So that is the statement. So Manipur High Court to hear the internet ban today, and Supreme Court declines to intervene initially. Obviously, first the matter goes to the High Court of the state. So Manipur High Court, it is directed that it will hear in chambers or on Friday a batch of petitions, which is seeking the restoration of internet access in the state of Manipur, just hours after the Supreme Court refrained from intervening in a separate plea, which was challenging the internet restrictions in the state. So committee on it has been formed by the Supreme Court. So earlier in the day, Supreme Court refrained from intervening in a separate petition, which was again challenging the same thing. And because the reason was the High Court was already hearing this issue, and it had constituted an expert committee on 27th June as well. So you need to find out about the legality of internet ban. And obviously the judgment would also become important, the premises of it, that all becomes important. So you need to know about what are the reasonable restrictions under which internet can be banned. So non-compliance of the orders of the Green Code, that is the NGT by the governments, that is a serious issue. So the outgoing chairperson of NGT says that the waste management and environmental safety, they are two main challenges in India. Waste management and environmental safety. So talking about the NGT's major achievements in the past 5 years, he says that the only achievement is taking decisions on the pending issues to the best of my understanding and the data available. And he says that in some cases, people died because of breach of the environmental safety. So he gave directions for the payment of compensation and taking measures to prevent such incidents. So basically, these things and these insights, they can be used even in GS4 ethics paper. And then for air, water, and other pollution, he said that I gave directions to prepare action plans and that oversaw how the plans they were being formulated. So we have done a lot of work on waste management. So even the laws, which was talking about the waste management, their important provisions, that is vital for us. Then what are the three main challenges to environment in India? First is waste management, that is a big issue. Environmental safety, that's another. And then comes the safety norms in the industrial processes. So these are the three main challenges according to the outgoing chairperson of NGT. Then what is the way out of the legacy issues, like we see the pollution in Yamuna, which continue to persist despite NGT orders. So how can we actually see the results when it comes to dealing with a situation like this? So he says that it's an issue to be addressed by the government or the executive that has to implement things. So we say that the quality of water, it is bad, and so you need to remedy it. But if it is not being done, it is serious issue to be addressed by the government. So non-compliance of the orders, that remains a serious issue when it comes to, basically here we can say that the cooperation between entity and the government or the executive, that needs to be strengthened. And obviously compliance with the orders of entity, that is an important thing in order to actually see the results on ground. Moving forward, so see what are the other important topics. So India needs a uniform civil court. This is an article by Venkaiah Naidu, sir. So he's the former Vice President of India. So India, being a diverse nation, is home to many religions, each with its distinct personal laws, which are governing marriage, divorce, adoption, inheritance, and succession. So it would be accurate to say that the absence of a uniform civil code, it has only served to perpetuate inequalities and inconsistencies in our land of rich diversity. So this has been a hindrance in the nation's progress towards social harmony, economic, and gender justice. So since we know the topic of uniform civil codes in news, we need to know about all the nuances. So when we talk about the debate in the Constituent Assembly, so the debate on UCC goes back to the Constituent Assembly debates, and one could assert that the legality of UCC, it is rooted in Constitution of India, Constituent Assembly debates, and also the Supreme Court of India judgments. So the Supreme Court judgments also became an important topic. So Constituent Assembly debates, they shed light on why do we need and what is the objective behind promoting a common civil code. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar was the chief architect of the Indian Constitution, made a strong case in the Constituent Assembly for framing a UCC. So he stressed its importance in ensuring gender equality and eradicating prevailing social evils. But then opponents of the UCC, they argued that they said that uh, basically opponents to UCC, they were arguing, they raised their respective arguments, but how B.R. Ambedkar encountered their opposition, he said that I personally do not understand why religion should be given this vast, expansive jurisdiction so as to cover the whole of life and to prevent the legislature from encroaching upon that field. So, after all, what are we having this liberty for? So we are having this liberty in order to reconfirm our social system, which is so full of iniquities, so full of inequalities and discriminations and other things, which are at conflict with our fundamental rights. So it is therefore quite impossible for anybody to conceive that the personal law shall be excluded from the jurisdiction of the state. So this was his argument to the oppositions being raised against the UCC. Then a view of other members that has also been mentioned here. So he says that since a consensus on UCC, it could not be reached in the Constituent Assembly, the subject found a place under Article 44 of the DPSP. So that's one thing. And this article, in a sense, is the constitutional mandate which requires the state to enact a UCC that applies to all citizens, cutting across faiths, practices, and personal laws. Then talking about the Supreme Court judgments regarding UCC, so in the Shah Bano case, Supreme Court said that it is a matter of regret that Article 44, it has remained a dead letter so far. And it pointed out that a UCC, it would help the cause of national integration. And then it said that in the constitutional order of priorities, the right to religious freedom is to be exercised in a manner which is consonant with the vision underlying the provisions of Part 3. Part 3 is the fundamental rights. So this was said in the Indian Young Lawyers Association case of 2018. So basically, the religious freedom that is enjoyed by people, that is not absolute in nature. Even like there are certain reasonable restrictions even on that. So talking about the essence of this whole discussion, so it is therefore a step in the right direction, which is long overdue to safeguard the fundamental rights of all citizens and reduce the social inequalities and gender discrimination. So that is the need for having UCC. Then it should be seen and understood as an attempt at creating a unified legal framework that upholds the principles which are enshrined in the Constitution and they have been reaffirmed by the Supreme Court in various judgments. Again, an important topic about internationalization of Indian rupee without the coin tossing. So here the author is Feroz Varun Gandhi. So let's see what are different arguments regarding the efforts that India is taking in order to internationalize the rupee and reduce our dependence upon currencies like US dollar. So government's announcement for a long-term roadmap for the further internationalization of the rupee can turn out to be a positive exercise. When we talk about 1950s, the Indian rupee was legal tender for almost all transactions in the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, and Qatar, with the Gulf monarchies purchasing rupees with the pound sterling. So we're talking about 1950s. Then in 1959, to mitigate the challenges which were associated with the gold smuggling, RBI Act that was brought in and that enabled the creation of the Gulf rupee, which with the notes issued by the central bank for circulation only in the West Asian region. So that was a change which was brought in 1959. And holders of the Indian currency were given some time period to exchange their currency, their Indian currency, with the transition which was happening smoothly. Then in 1966, India devalued its currency, eventually causing some West Asian countries to replace the Gulf rupee with their own currencies. So that was a major shift. And flagging confidence in Indian rupees stability combined with an oil revenue linked boom, slowly it led to the introduction of sovereign currencies in the region. So the move in 2023 to withdraw the rupees 2000 notes has also impacted confidence in the rupee. So that is one of the negative fallouts of this decision. Again, obviously the same thing goes for demonetization of 2016, and the countries like Bhutan and Nepal, they continue to fear additional policy changes by the RBI in the Indian currency framework. So the rupee's internationalization cannot make a start without accounting for the concerns which are expressed by India's neighbors in the Indian rupee. So the one challenge is that we have to deal with very little international demand about or demand for the Indian rupee. So it is far from being internationalized because the daily average share for the rupee in the global forex market, it hovers around at 1.6%, while India's share of the global trade is 2%. So India has taken some steps to promote the internationalization of rupee, like we've enabled the external commercial borrowings in rupees with a push to the Indian banks to open the rupee washro accounts for the banks from Russia, UAE, Sri Lanka, and Mauritius. So you need to know about how does these washro accounts they function. So that's an important thing. But we see that such transactions they have been limited with India still buying oil from Russia in dollars. So I talked about this challenge yesterday also. Then apart from this, for a currency to be considered a reserve currency, rupee needs to be fully convertible, readily usable, and available in sufficient quantities. So these are certain prerequisites. And India does not permit full capital account convertibility as of now, with significant constraints on the exchange of its currency with others, which is driven by past fears of the capital flight. And then exchange rate volatility is another concern given the significant current in the capital account deficits that we have. So these are some concerns we need to ensure how are we actually going to overcome, and then at the same time ensure that we take rupee at the global level. So here we are having one case study about the China's experience. So China's example in internationalizing the renminbi has lessons for us. So as an online article which was highlighting, it highlights that before 2004, the renminbi, it could not be used outside China. By 2007, we saw that the dim sum bond and the offshore renminbi bond market, it had been created with the financial institutions in Hong Kong. They were allowed to issue the dim sum bonds by 2009. And post 2008, China, it pursued a phased approach, enabling the use of renminbi for the trade financing, investment, and the over the long term as a reserve currency also. So first, the step it took was that it allowed the use of renminbi outside China for the current account transactions. And by 2009, China, it had signed the currency swap agreements also. So that was the first step. So over time, we saw that it was internationalized with the reserve currency status increasing. That was increasingly enabled. The reserves that are like, as the article, it highlights this thing. So that's how basically gradually China, it could take its domestic currency at the international scale. Apart from this, pursue these reforms. So we need to obviously focus upon certain reforms. So that can be pursued to internationalize the rupee. So it must be made more freely convertible. That is one area where we need more reforms with the goal of full convertibility by 2060, which means that we'll be allowing the financial investments move freely between India and abroad. This would allow foreign investors to easily buy and sell the rupee, enhancing its liquidity and making it more attractive. Then, apart from this, RBI should also pursue a deeper and more liquid rupee bond market, enabling the foreign investors and Indian trade partners to have more investment options in rupees, enabling its international use. That's the second thing that we can work upon. And additionally, the tax incentives to the foreign businesses to utilize the rupee in operations in India would also help. And RBI and the Ministry of Finance, they must ensure currency management stability and also improve the exchange rate regime, so that basically we need to ensure much more stability here and more demonetization. That is again going to impact the confidence of people in the Indian rupee. So we need to monitor these things, and the government's roadmap for the further internationalization of the rupee, it will make it easier for Indian businesses to do business or invest abroad and enhance rupees liquidity while enhancing the financial stability also. So it must also benefit Indian citizens, enterprises, government's ability to finance the deficits, and it's a delicate balance to trade off the rupee convertibility for the exchange rate stability. So that's a very, very critical area. So one hopes predictable currency management policies, they will be instituted going forward. So this is again an important question, that should internet shutdowns be used to maintain public order or not? So here we are having an parlay, which is basically kind of an interview. So freedom of speech and expression is not an absolute right, obviously, but shutdowns, they cannot happen for frivolous reasons. So for example, here Rajasthan cut off internet before the REIT examination, and West Bengal did the same before the Madhyamik Pariksha. So you can't be like, doing this every second day for silly reasons, I should say. But when the situation is grave and it's all about restoring public order, restoring the situation of law and order in a state, then we can definitely move forward with this decision of internet shutdown. And as we saw it before also, that there's going to be one important Supreme Court judgment. And here we are having like Article 19 of the Constitution mentions freedom of speech and freedom to practice any profession. Article 21 protects the right to life and liberty, which also encompasses the right to education, right to exercise one's freedom to access the internet. But again, obviously, this has some reasonable restrictions. So Supreme Court, it has held in various decisions, including in the Anuradha Bhasin case and the Fahima Shirin case, that access to internet, it has to be preserved. And shutdowns, they should be exercised only in situations which require exceptional control and surveillance. So court has said that a shutdown needs to be temporary, limited in scope, it needs to be lawful and proportionate. So we have Article 92 of the Constitution, which says that reasonable restrictions ought to be imposed wherever it is necessary. So the grounds, it includes threat to the nation, to national sovereignty, integrity and defense, or to avoid incitement to or the commission of a cognizable offense. So these are some of the reasonable restrictions under which internet shutdown can be imposed. Then talking about the law, so it is the Information Technology Act of 2000, which have certain provisions regarding the same. Understanding dark patterns, this topic has been repeated a number of times, so not going into the details of it, you can go through it once. No doubt it's very important, but since we have taken it before, so we're not repeating this same topic. Then the provisions of the High Seas Treaty, again, it's a repeat. You can go through it on your own. Very, very important topic. So you can just go through it once. So you can see still incidences and headlines like 62-year-old woman shot dead in Imphal West. So situation is very critical. US is saying that it is ready to help in Manipur if asked by India. So you need to think, can we really allow a country, a foreign country or a third party, I can say, to handle a domestic situation of law and order in India? So this was obviously raised questions over the capability of the Union Government of India and even the state government. So India-France relations, they're important area. Then what are going to be the focus areas and the areas on which we'll be having new deals because of the upcoming Prime Minister of India's visit to France. So co-development rather than co-production, that will be the focus of India-France ties as a country as they prepare to mark 25 years of strategic partnership next week. And apart from this, defense, energy, space, new technologies, and more. So we are working on an ambitious agenda for the strategic partnership between both the sides. So Chandrayaan-3 launch has been decided for 14th of July, lunar landing on August 23 or 24. So we hope for the best and we need to know about certain technology that is being used. So it will be launched through LVM the 3 and you can like find out about other technicalities of it. So we have talked about the Wagner Group and their activities, and then obviously the developments that we saw in the context of Russia. So Belarus president claims that Wagner chief is in Russia. So from the perspective of geography or map work, we can say location of Belarus that becomes important. So you can just open the atlas and try to understand its location. On the business page, Finance Ministry pushes for reforms to spur more FDI. So ministry calls for more attention to the issues faced by the global investors, including the infrastructure and the difficulties in setting up the large factories. So courting the foreign investors had the net inflows, they fell a sharper 27%. We're talking about the FDI inflow, so we are seeing a slowdown. But it was being said that the fall in FDI was not unique to India only, because that is obviously because of the global economic situation. We are seeing a fall in FDI inflows in different countries. So gross FDI flows, they moderated 16% last year from the record high of $84 billion in 2021-22. And increasing investments in the friendly countries was causing fragmentation in the FDI flows across the globe. So there's certain major economies which are attracting more of FDI. So that's why we are seeing some regional disparities. So certain global reasons, it includes escalation, the geopolitical stress because of the Russia-Ukraine war, enhanced volatility in the global financial systems is another concern, sharp price protection in the global stock markets, and a high magnitude of El Nino impact, modest trade activity and FDI inflows owing to the frail global demand. These could all constrain the growth in future. Coming to the Mint newspaper again, here we have it again an important topic. Can Indian rupee be turned into a global currency or not? So we've like already taken up this topic before. Now we are understanding that can it be internationalized into a global currency or not? So we'll be looking at different important factors. So in this graph, you can see the waning dependence. So Indian economy's linkages with the rest of the world in terms of the trade and capital flows, no doubt it has increased. But with the currency internationalization, India's requirement for maintaining the forex reserves in dollars will reduce. So basically, you're talking about the reduction, the dependence upon the foreign currency, specifically the US dollar. So here, even the graph is showing kind of a stable trend. So this is the trend of the forex reserves in billion dollars. So forex in terms of US dollars. So that is kind of a way we are seeing that it has peaked and it is now moving towards a downward trend, that what we can expect going forward. So we know that what is currency internationalization, that's already well understood. Will India benefit from a rupee move or not? So the use of rupee in the cross-border transaction, it helps the country's exporters and importers to reduce their transaction cost. That is one potential benefit, and limit the exchange rate risk which are associated. So it also helps lower the cost of the capital due to better access to the global financial markets and reduces the need to maintain forex reserves. So these are some of the benefits out of this move, which we expect. And internationalization could also allow the government to finance part of its budget deficit by issuing the domestic currency debt in the international markets rather than issuing the foreign currency instruments. So it also allows the government to fund part of its current account deficit by private capital flows from abroad. So what is the trend with the Indian currency? So RBI, it has put in place an additional arrangement for invoicing, payment and settlement of the trade in rupees through special rupee wash-through accounts. So as I already highlighted, you need to understand the proper working mechanism behind these accounts. And a total of 18 countries, they have been allowed to open these accounts. And the Asian Clearing Union, it has introduced a rupee as a settlement currency. So Sri Lanka, it is formally named rupee as the designated foreign currency also. So these are some of the latest developments. So what are the challenges going forward? The biggest challenge is whether or not other countries they will actually accept the Indian currency or not. And then what are the other factors on which we need to work upon in order to ensure that the countries they start accepting Indian currency as part of their foreign currencies. So rupee, it is not fully convertible, and India's share of the global exports of the goods is about 2%. So this reduces the necessity for the other countries to hold the rupees. So either basically this is indicating towards that India needs to work upon also increasing its share of the global exports of the goods. And recent negotiation with Russia over the rupee settlement mechanism, it showed that Moscow it was not willing to hold rupee deposits because of the trade gap between the two countries. So likewise, we'll be having different concerns with respect to each economy. Then the recommendations of panel. So it is suggested some short-term measures like opening of the Indian rupee accounts for the non-resident in and outside India, and integrating Indian payment systems with other countries for the cross-border transactions. Then in medium term measures, like there's a need to review the taxes on the masala bonds and international use of real-time gross settlement for the cross-border trade transactions. And from the long-term perspective, the panel has recommended that efforts they should be made for inclusion of rupee in the IMF's SDR basket. So here you need to know and have much clarity about SDR, how does it functions, which all currencies they form a part of the SDR. Coming to Financial Express, so government says that domestic demand remains strong. So external factors, they may, however, challenge the growth outlook in the current financial year. But again, as we talk about the resilience of the Indian economy, that remains very strong. So for the medium to the long term, country appears poised to sustain its growth in a more durable way than before due to the stellar macroeconomic management that we are seeing. And urban demand conditions, they remain resilient. So we need to work upon recovering back the rural demand. That is one of the areas where still the potential lies, and it can help us more. And the assessment of the economy, however, does not perfectly fit in with all the high frequency indicators. Then, according to Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, unemployment in the rural India hit a 2-year high of 8.73%. So whenever like we're talking about, so we need to focus upon the rural economy, be it the consumption demand or even in case of job generation. So that should be the focus. So ahead of the GST meet or the GST Council, so rift wide open on the online gaming tax. So this is also one of the hot topics. Only UP, West Bengal, they are fully in favor of 28% GST on the online gaming industry. Some states, they have sought GST levy only on the platform fees, which is charged by the online gaming firms. So like different states, they have different point of view. So it is important to bring them on the same page. And that is the thing forward. So GST Council is to decide on a revised tax structure for thriving online gaming sector during its meeting, which is scheduled for 11th of July. Then monsoon nears the normal range as the deficit is now at only 5%. So that is a positive indicator, and it is going to help us in stabilizing the food inflation specifically. So after toys, the quality standards for the household goods going to be released soon. So here appliances grouped in 6 broad categories. You can read about all these factual things on your own through this article for more clarity. Then Udan scheme, it's obviously often repeated in newspapers. Again, you can find out about its background and the basic provisions. So ensure loans to farmers, finance minister to the PSBs seeks a meeting of the targets in the PSL subcategory. So focus on fair and transparent recognition of the NPS is extremely important in order to know about the reality about the health of the banking sector. And we have seen that with time, NPS, they have drastically reduced. So that is also showing towards the strength of the banking sector. But again, the thing that we need to focus upon, that's a good thing that NPS, they are reducing. But the reason behind the reduction becomes much more important for us to understand. So that's there. And coming to Indian Express newspaper, so let's see the important topics. This we've already discussed about the UCC. Apart from this, let's move to the editorial page directly. Funding the future. So proposed competitive grant system for the universities and institutes could transform science research in India. So an 8-member committee was formed in 2017 to draft a national education policy, and the committee's recommendations, they were published as the National Education Policy of 2020. So it highlighted the lacunae in the higher education system, most prominent being the rigid boundaries of disciplines and the fields, thousands of standalone institutions that exist, the absence of research at most universities and colleges, and there's lack of transparent and competitive peer-reviewed research funding system. So these are some of the challenges that exist. And with that, we have the NEP 2020 in order to deal with them. And right now we are seeing the government focusing upon even the research and development sector. So they have formed the National Research Foundation to manage a competitive grant system for R&D in the universities and institutes which are involved in the higher education. So India needs a strong competitive grant system as has been proposed by the NEP 2020, and the number of institutes, universities, they has increased significantly with time. So number of doctoral students, that has also increased significantly. However, the overall funding under the extramural grants, it has remained static, and this has led to poor doctoral level training with which has very grim consequences for the country. So we could just go through all the technicalities which are mentioned here in this article. The bank locker agreements, so RBS conditions and the customer complains about them. So RBS deadline here, 18th of August 2021 was the RBI. It has issued instructions asking banks to enter into the revised agreements with their existing locker holders by 1st of January 2023. But on January this year, we saw RBI, it had said in a circular that large number of customers, they are yet to sign the revised agreement. In many cases, banks, they are yet to inform the customers also about this change. So the deadline was extended till December this year. And present status, so many, they are yet to execute this revised agreement. So instruction to banks have been issued by RBI about this. Unresolved issues like customers, they have complained, the banks, they have not informed them about the renewal of the locker agreement even now. So there's still delay continues, and in the context of the conditions of use, so to ensure the prompt payment of the locker rent, RBI, it has also allowed banks to obtain at the time of allotment of the locker a term deposit that would cover 3 years rent and the charges for breaking open the locker in case such an eventuality rises. And prohibited articles, so bank lockers, they are meant for use that is legal, such as keeping valuables like jewelry and important papers safe. They are not meant to store cash there. So weapons, explosive, drugs, and other illegal substances or any perishable, radioactive, illegal, or otherwise hazardous material or any substance that might endanger the bank or its clients, they are not permitted at all. So it is the responsibility of the bank to take all the steps for the safety and security of the premises in which the vaults they are housed. And that is obviously the responsibility of the bank. So if there is a loss of the content of the locker because of some reasons, because of the bank, and if there is loss that is attributable to fraud by its employees, so bank's liability is for an amount which is equivalent to 100 times the prevailing annual rent of the locker, and RBI has also informed about this thing. So the banks, they explicitly mention in agreement that they are not responsible for any damage to or loss of the contents. However, it is their responsibility, and this is the thing which has been reiterated by RBI. Then India and the SCO, again, important topic here about, since we held a recent summit which was hosted by India, and the meeting was held in a virtual format because it was delayed because of the Indian Prime Minister's US visit. So some latest developments, this we have already discussed about them. What were the new things that emerged, the new topics of discussion? Iran became a new member, then Pakistan, China, targeting terror, what Putin said, the summit statement, and the strategic autonomy thing. You can just scan through this article once. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us in this analysis session. I hope things are much more clearer to you. And do subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and also hit the like button for the video.